Hi there, and a very warm welcome to this new series, How to Run a Board Meeting. I'm Sean McDonald from Board Pro, and it's great to have you with us. We're kicking things off today with a real bang, and who better to launch our 6-part series on how to run a board meeting than the legendary Stephen Bowman. In this session, Stephen dives into the powerful connection between your organization's strategic vision and the board agenda, and how getting this right sets the tone for every board conversation that follows. So get ready to shift your thinking and sharpen your focus. Now, I know many of you who are joining are CEOs, busy people with a full calendar and plenty of boardroom experience under your belts. So first things first, thank you for carving out your time to be here today. We've designed the episodes to be practical, fast-paced, and filled with real-world insights you can take straight back to your organization. Stephen Bowman is a seasoned board advisor with a great depth of experience and skill facilitating board reviews and strategic planning. Stephen's held numerous CEO and board positions with some of North America and Australia's most prestigious organizations, as well as authoring and co-authoring over 14 books on strategy, risk, and executive leadership. So without further delay, let me hand over to Stephen to get us started.
Thanks very much, Sean, and welcome for those of you who are watching this. So one of the key elements of any board are the meetings that we have as directors and as a board. And it is probably the most underutilized mechanism because so many board meetings go over time, or they focus on things that probably don't need to be focused on to the exclusion of things that probably did need to be focused on. So what we want to do is to provide you with a framework for really, really great board meetings. And there's 4 elements in there, essentially. First is absolutely utilizing, understanding, and leveraging your own vision or your purpose. So vision statement, purpose statement, whatever you might call it, but actually using it. And I'll spend a minute or two just going over through what that might look like. The second key element is that once you actually understand your vision and you use it constantly, then you can develop up an agenda that supports the focus and the strategic thinking of your fellow directors, so that we as a board are focusing on those things that are actually really our job, which is creating the future. We can monitor, we can look at the compliance stuff, but that takes a smaller amount of time than actually keeping us focused on the strategy, the key risks, the opportunities that arise from those risks. And this is how structuring your agenda can really have a huge impact on the quality of the conversations and the decision-making of your board. And then to support that, if you get together really good board papers, board reports that again help to focus your directors, then we are starting to have a meeting that is worth its weight in gold, because we're getting very smart people looking at things from the different perspectives, but with a real focus on the key strategic items that need to be focused on. And then if we can also develop the strategic thinking skills of our colleagues, so that when they're actually reading the papers, they're asking the right sorts of questions. They come up with insights that no one else could have come up with, but then that's why they're sitting around the board table. So if we can develop our strategic thinking skills that are supported by the board papers, supported by the agenda, and guided by our vision, that is one great board meeting. So before we kick off on that, just a couple of ground rules for any board meeting, and in particular the setting of the agenda. The chair owns the sequence of events at a board meeting. And this has been tested at law, and it's found its way into all sorts of sort of good practice and best practice guides, but I'll be very overt about this. The chair owns the sequence, which by definition means the chair owns the agenda. Now, when setting the agenda, who sets the agenda for the board? Well, typically it's the CEO and or the company secretary, maybe working together, who then pass it by the chair and get the chair's input into it. But in the end, the chair owns it. Chairs that are very, very experienced will often set the agenda themselves, but then again, they'll also bring in the company secretary and the Chief Executive Officer to see whether or not anything needs to be changed or tweaked. But the chair owns that sequence. Now, that means that if a director would like something put on the agenda for discussion, they have to actually petition the chair for that to occur, because the chair owns the agenda. So it doesn't mean that we ignore our directors, but nor does it mean at a board meeting a director says, I want to talk about X, Y, and Z. They should have petitioned the chair prior to that and convinced the chair that there was a strategic issue behind that was worthy of board time. So for those organisations where directors can come up and, any matters arising that's not on the agenda that you want us to cover, probably shouldn't find its way onto your agenda. You should be asking your directors to do all of that thinking before the board meeting so that we can make sure that we have the really important things included on the agenda. So, where it all starts with your vision statement or your purpose statement. Now, what's the difference between a vision or a mission or a purpose or a statement of fundamentals? It doesn't matter what you call it. What does matter is that whatever you're using is something that is useful and gives you guidance. So a good vision statement will provide strategic insight if we unpack the elements of that vision for a particular project or activity that we're currently discussing. How do we turn our vision statement into a strategic advantage? You use it and you ask the questions that relate back to your vision about, well, how is this project going to help us do? And then you can actually articulate part of the vision. It's also a great way of unpacking a situation or something that is relatively new for the board, unpacking it through the lens of your vision statement. So you as directors, when faced with an agenda and an item coming up, first of all, should be able to remember what your vision statement is, even if you can't recite it exactly, and also use the elements of that to help unpack the sorts of questions that really should be the focus of the board. You harness the power of your vision statement by using it. There's only two types of vision statements, those that work and those that don't. So the question then becomes, how do we know that ours works? And the answer to that is very simple, because we use it. It works because it's useful, because we can use it. How do you know if your vision statement doesn't work? Well, because you don't use it and you can't use it. Might be time for a rewrite into something that's actually useful. So harnessing the power of your vision statement comes through using it in everything. You'll see some examples as we go through, but you always put your vision statement at the top of all of your board agendas, your staff meeting agendas, agendas for other meetings. Always have the vision statement up there to remind us that we're not here to meet. We're here to create the vision through the work that this committee or that this board is doing. And then using the vision as a decision-making filter, when reports come up to us as directors to consider or discuss, then through the filter of that vision enables us to actually look at different sides of things that we might not otherwise thought of. So it all starts off with your vision statement. Now, should your vision be short or long? It doesn't matter. Remember that definition? There's only two types, those that work, those that don't. If your vision statement works, it doesn't matter how long it is. So put your vision at the top of your board agenda to remind directors that's why we're there. Use it as either the CEO or use it as a director to help shape conversations. So you as a CEO can actually look at the reports that are being provided to the board and look to see how you can structure those reports so that they overtly address the vision. And that can help steer the conversation. If something is going off a little off track, then you as the CEO could say, so how is this going to help us with, and then recite the vision. Or we seem to be going around circles in this one. If we go back to our vision, does that give us a different insight into how we might attack that? So it can actually help steer conversations, and also it can guide behaviour. Now, we've all sat in board meetings when at times the behaviour was probably not what it should have been from people. Remembering and using the vision to bring us back to purpose again, to bring us back to why we're sitting around here in the first place, is one of the simplest and easiest ways to get bad behavior back on track again. And you can actually read out the vision, you can look at the elements of the vision and relate that back to the conversation so you can reframe the conversation and the behavior then starts to be where it needs to be. So what many boards are starting to do now, and this is really good for CEOs to look at as part of developing up the board pack, is to start off each board meeting with a short video of, or photograph of, or story of some of the key work that's been going on. Some boards use this to reflect on what's really important to them in the next 6 months, and there might be a short story or video or photo around that. We had one recently, very, very, very large organisation, where they start off each board meeting with a reflection and a short story from one of their frontline staff on work health and safety issues that were illustrated through activity or through behaviour. And that's the chair's way of making sure that the board is absolutely focused on safety, because in this sector it was particularly important. To focus on safety, not just as a work health and safety thing, but as one of our guiding principles in everything that we do. Faith-based organisations will often start off a board meeting with a prayer. The really good ones then relate that prayer back to their risk management plan or their strategic plan or their stakeholder engagement plan, whatever it might be. But we start off with an anecdote or a story or a photograph, and we relate that back to our vision. We relate it back to our strategies. This reminds us, again, that we're not there to meet. That's just a vehicle. We're there to create the future for the communities that we serve. So explore this mission moment and even bring it as a regular part of your agenda planning. Now, some fundamentals, and the reason I say they're fundamentals is often they're not followed because we tend to forget about it. People tend to have, in many instances, agendas that are the same format every meeting. And then it becomes, look how busy we are. Look how busy we are. Oh, and here's another CEO's report that says how busy they are. And look, here's another report from our committee that says how busy they are. And that is not the best use of board time. So always strategy ahead of operational matters. If there's something that is of strategic importance, put it up front. It doesn't matter where in the strategic plan it fits or where in other agendas it has gone. Have those big items right up front. Directors have a limited amount of headspace and bandwidth when it comes to 3-hour meeting, 5-hour meetings, sometimes they're day meetings depending on the organisation. You've got to get the important stuff up front. And in fact, what some chairs do, and this might be a good hint for you, is that they will start off a board meeting by saying, here are the 3 key items that I want us to focus on today. And then the agenda reflects that as well. So make sure that you're structuring your agenda so that those items that are strategic, far-reaching, big, intellectual or far-reaching items that are worthy of the board time are right up front. Otherwise, what will happen, and I'm sure you've all sat in board meetings where this happens, maybe not on your organisation, but you get stuck on a particular small thing that someone's brought up because it's their pet project or it's their own personal agenda. So prioritise for strategic before anything else. And one of the great ways of doing that is with your CEO report. The CEO report should be one of the first items on your agenda because that should provide the tone for the rest of the meeting. The CEO report shouldn't just be a list of, look at all the meetings I've gone and the people I've talked to. It really should cover key items such as, here are some emerging risks that we need to be aware of, and I'd like to allocate some board time where we deep dive into some of those at a later date. Here are the 3 big strategic issues that are coming up from our strategic plan. Here are the whispers that I've heard that are worthy of board time looking up. So what keeps me awake at night time really is the is the idea behind a good CEO's report, not just a reflection of activity. Now, one of the great tools, and again, many boards still don't use this, you may be, and that's a great start, but one of the great tools is this notion of using a consent agenda. It's either called a consent agenda or a block agenda. Now, this means that you allocate in advance what type of papers are on the agenda. Is it a paper that is for noting only? Is it a paper that is for discussion? Or is it a paper that is for decision? All those items that are for noting only, then you can put in a block and put it at the end of the agenda. If it's for noting, it shouldn't have to follow a sequence. It's just for noting. So many of the committee reports will be for noting only. If there is an item that needs to be discussed, it should be pulled out as a separate discussion item, not hidden within a long, over-articulated committee report or staff report. If there's an item that is worthy of discussion, pull it out as a discussion paper. So all those items for noting only go at the end of the agenda. And then at the start of your agenda, you have an item that says present, apologies, declaration of interest, and then approval of all the noting only papers. So that's called a block agenda or a consent agenda because we consent not to talk about those items that are for noting only. I still see on agendas these days where, this is a for noting only, but there'll be a verbal report from X, Y, and Z on this. Please don't do that. If it's for noting only, it's for noting only. Now, if a director wants to talk about something on that for noting only paper, then they should petition the chair prior to the board meeting and say, I think there is an item that is of sufficient strategic importance that I'd like you to raise it as a for discussion item and put it in the appropriate part of the agenda for that. But you never want to hear at a board meeting from a director, this was an interesting report here, I'd like to talk about X, Y, and Z. You shouldn't be hearing that at the board meeting. You should be hearing about it prior to the board meeting. So, items for discussion, items for decision, and make it very clear that these are the ones that we're going to spend the most time on. The decision items, usually up front, and then the for discussion items, usually next, and then the for noting only items, always at the end, because then you can deal with them in one block. One of the things that we find really useful is where you can actually color code them. Or if you use a board portal such as Board Pro, then you can actually make it very clear what sort of items these are. And it will actually ask you before you can populate the agenda, is this an item for noting, discussion, decision, or an item for information? We still see board packs of 3 or 4 or 5 or 600 pages. And I guarantee if it's that long, the vast majority of the material in there really should be items for information, i.e., here's a full report on our new marketing brand. It's 50 pages long. It's fantastic. Here's a link if you want to go through. Here's a 1-page for discussion paper that's based on those 50 pages. Please don't put it into your board pack. If something's in the board pack, then directors feel absolutely obligated to read it. And then once they've read 50 pages, they've got less bandwidth for the more important 10 pages or 5 pages that are coming up. So be very clear about what you actually put in the board pack. Items for information, in my experience and the experience of high-performing chairs, should be a short summary of what it is and then a link if someone is interested in the detail on it. One of the things we've come across relatively recently is this notion of a briefing note, and the board that's using this is probably one of the most effective, brilliant boards I've come across in decades. And if they're listening to this, they'll know who they are. But I've been given permission to use this format, which is what they've called a briefing note. In this case, it was a briefing note for discussion. And it's really simple. Here's a couple of sentences on the background. Give me the context of this. What's the background behind it? And then 2 or 3 sentences of the summary of the really important things that are in there. And then here are the items that we want discussed. here are some questions that need to be asked. So you get the context, you get an overarching summary, very, very short, and you've got the key discussion points that we want to come up on one page. And they use this for all their papers for decision or papers for discussion that actually help the directors focus. So I bring that to your attention. Use it. You'll find that you'll never go back once you've started using that as a process. Often what we find when developing up the agenda and you get your financial reports, for example, is you'll get even a summary sometimes of dashboard of ratios and pretty looking graphs and all of those things. Just be careful when you're doing the graphic side of things. Be careful about your use of ratios. Understand what they are. Make sure that people understand what these ratios are. But also, more importantly, put in what the trigger points are. If it falls below this, then we need to do something. If it goes above this, then we need to do something. Here's what we currently have. It falls within a range. We don't actually need to do anything. But that's all done by the way you structure your ratios. So just be very aware, because I've seen them overused, overdone, and they really don't provide me with useful information. Risk reports are some of the worst reports that people do. Providing your board with a risk register is not providing them with a risk report. So what we need to be able to do is to keep the board focused on what are the key emerging risks that are coming up that we need to spend some time as a board discussing and looking at what are the options and the implications of these key emerging risks for things, for example, things right at the moment, like the changes to the whole world order, the tariffs that are being introduced. Now, hopefully some of you will be listening to this when this is all history, but it's happening right now. Things like artificial intelligence, these are all emerging risks which have enormous opportunities behind them, but we need to provide the bandwidth to the board through structuring our agenda of having some items where we could actually deep dive into some of these areas. So the CEO and exec team are vigilant over all of the risks of the organisation, but as a director, we need to have our focus through the way we structure our agenda on the top 3 or 4 key risks, how well they're being managed, but more importantly, what are the potential strategic opportunities, the business opportunities that are arising or may arise through our understanding and using these risks. So really look at this as an opportunity to expand our horizons and start to look at risk not as a compliance issue, but actually as another strategic filter for how we can actually develop up new potential business or service opportunities. Dashboards we mentioned, again, they're very, very useful. Trend information is useful. But if you're going to put a dashboard in, then make sure that there is some heading or something somewhere that says, here are the things we want you to talk about. And this is where your board briefing paper could really come into its own. The board briefing paper might say, look, here's the context behind this. Yeah, the summary is we've got these things working. Now, here are the 2 discussion points. We'd like you to talk about this ratio and its trend, and we'd like you to talk about the implications of what we're seeing happening in this area. Be a great way of actually helping our board focus. Leading indicators and lagging indicators. In many board agendas, you'll see the reports coming through and they're focusing on the lagging indicators. Look at all the things that have happened. Financial reports, for example, profit and loss balance sheet and so on. They unfortunately still tend to focus on lagging indicators. What we can do is to say, well, what would the leading indicators be for this? Here's our finances, our P&L. Here are some of the trends that we've seen through the reasons for the variance. Now, some of the leading indicators that might start to kick in might be these things. We need to start thinking about the strategic implications in 2 or 3 years behind what we're seeing here, not just, oh yes, they balance. Oh, I can see the reasons. That's not a good enough financial report. And as part of your agenda setting, your finances pretty much should never be just a foreknoting. There should be questions that are asked around it about not just now, but what might be happening in 6 months, what might be happening in 12 months. What do we need to prepare for in 2 years? What do we need to start looking at now that our finances are giving us an indication of? So look at leading indicators versus lagging indicators. And I think you'll be surprised how many lagging indicators find their way into your board reporting. One of the things that boards are starting to find very useful, and there's been a lot of news reports over the last few years and still happening today, about whether or not the organisation is solvent and whether our key payments have been made. And so this can often be done as a very simple CFO and CEO declaration. If you're not sure what they look like, then get onto Google or use ChatGPT or whatever you like to actually come up with some examples. They're very simple, but what that does is it means that as a board, we are comfortable talking about these things, also knowing we're solvent and also knowing that everything that we're supposed to have paid have actually been paid. Simple to do, just needs to be done. So when we're looking at board agendas, the key purpose of a board agenda is to keep us focused, not to fill it up with stuff that we don't need to spend time doing. So if you look at the board agenda through the filter of, let's have our vision statement up there to remind us why we're there. Let's have all those items that are for decision up front with a board briefing paper. Let's have all those items that are for discussion, the next level. Let's have all those items that are for noting or for information only right at the very end, just to make the point that they are there just for noting. And also when we're looking at our board reports, which is another part of this series that Board Pro is putting on about board reporting, the key question I found that is not answered terribly well is, in this board report, where's Wally? Where's Wally in all of this? Don't make me go searching for Wally. Put a big yellow circle around it or a red circle around it. And and if you've got extra things, don't ask me to go searching for them. Pull them out from a paper for discussion or for decision, rather than making me search through the paper to find out where that is. So the notion of board agendas is to help keep our directors focused. And if we keep ourselves focused, then our board meeting is actually going to be an enormous contribution to our job as a board, which is to make the choices that create the future for the communities that we serve. One of the things that I invite you to do, if you so choose, is to go and have a look at a resource that we've just put up. And this has been put up for the next generation of directors and the next generation of senior executives. And it's all free. It's www.consciousgovernanceinsights.com. Now, we've got a strategic agenda template that you have the ability to download and use if you're not using a board portal. And in that template, you will find instructions for how to use it and examples and reasons why these things are so important. Now, what's better than a word template? I know, a board portal that does it all for you. Sean, over to you.
Thanks, Stephen. So to this point, I'd like to show you how much importance Board Pro place on what Stephen's been discussing with you on this episode. When you're building your agenda and board pack with Board Pro, you now have 3 options available to you. You can clone from a previous agenda, which is most popular, create your agenda using our best practice template, or now create an agenda with Stephen's strategic agenda template. Now, my short demo today focuses on the third option. Now, once selected, you're presented with a pre-configured structure that follows Stephen's template. Any section or item can be moved, added to, or removed if it does not suit your specific purpose. Each agenda item has a helpful hint that tells you about that specific item. Each agenda item has a description, a purpose, presenter, and time allocation for that item to enable you to keep your meeting on track. Along with the strategic agenda template, you also have access to our most popular workflow items in central registers, including the interest register, action items, and confirmation of minutes from your previous board meeting. You also have the ability to add your board papers to each agenda item as shown here in item 3.1. The order of which can be changed simply by dragging the document to another location in the order. Board Pro takes care of the rest, simply and quickly paginating and building your singular board pack in the background. Let's take a look now at what the agenda looks like in its finished form, with your board pack PDF compiled and ready for distribution. You can see here we have a really clean and professional looking board pack, including a cover page with your organization's logo, a table of index complete with hyperlinks to your board papers in the pack, and your agenda ready for a solid strategic board meeting. Each agenda item is color-coded for purpose, making it easy for your directors to focus on those high-priority agenda items. So that's a quick overview of our strategic agenda template with BoardPro.
So we're thrilled to bring you our brand new 6-part series designed to help CEOs with their most important meeting of the month. Whether you're looking to sharpen your strategic vision, craft smarter board agendas, write more effective minutes, or ensure clear follow-through on board actions, this series has you covered. And each episode dives into one of the 6 essential pillars of running a successful board meeting, no matter where you are on your governance journey. You'll find practical insights, proven tools, and fresh inspiration to elevate your boardroom impact. So let's take a look at what's coming up for you in the series. In the next episode, we have Julie Garland-McClellan, CEO of Directors Dilemma and a leading expert in governance. Julie will take us into the world of board papers, and not just any papers, but the kind that inform, inspire, and ignite action. And if you've ever wondered how to lift the quality and impact of your board papers and materials, this is a session not to miss. Then we'll hear from Danica McLean, who is the Managing Director of Board Administration Services, one of New Zealand's leading outsourced board administrators and organisations. Danica will walk us through how to build, organise and deliver a board pack that doesn't just tick boxes, but sets your board up for success. She'll show you how to simplify the process while increasing professionalism and confidence. In episode 4, we'll hear from Fiona McKenzie, founder and managing director of Resolving Matters. Fiona will dive into the most critical success factors of any board meeting, director engagement. Because let's face it, without it, the boardroom stalls, and with it, you unlock real momentum and power. Fiona will show you how to create meetings where every director is switched on, contributing and driving value. Next up in the series, we'll dive into a topic that often gets overlooked at board meetings, but it's absolutely critical to good governance, and that is effective board minutes. And to guide us through this session, I'll be delighted to introduce Jen Butler, a highly experienced board secretary and administrator who brings a wealth of knowledge from both the public and private sectors. Jen has worked across a wide range of organisations of all sizes, and she's well known for her fresh collaborative approach to governance, planning and administration. In this episode, Jen will unpack what really makes board minutes effective, not just as a record, but as a strategic tool that supports clarity, accountability, and momentum between meetings. If you're a clever CEO who's ever wondered how much is too much or not enough when it comes to board minute taking, then this session's definitely for you. In episode 6, we'll hear from Giselle McLaughlin, who will dive into the critical and often under-prioritized area of executive management accountability and follow-up. It's one thing to make decisions in the boardroom, but it's another to ensure that those decisions are followed through with clarity, ownership, and measurable outcomes. Giselle will walk us through practical strategies to close the loop on board actions, track progress effectively, and build a culture of accountability that drives real results between meetings. If you've ever felt like board decisions vanish into a black hole after the meeting ends, this episode is a must for you. So we've packed these 6 episodes with practical insights, expert know-how, and tools you can apply right away. As CEOs, you don't just attend board meetings, you lead them, and these episodes will help you do exactly that with more clarity, confidence, and impact. And that wraps up today's powerful session on developing a strategic vision and agenda. A massive thank you to the brilliant Stephen Bowman for his insights, inspiration, and practical tools. A short masterclass, in fact, in strategic thinking and board leadership. We hope you're leaving energized with fresh perspectives and at least one actionable idea to bring to your next board meeting. And if you're feeling inspired to take the next step, now's the perfect time to give BoardPro a try with our free 30-day trial, and there's no credit card required, just a simple way to experience smarter board meetings. So on behalf of all of us at BoardPro, thank you for being part of today's episode. Stay bold, stay strategic, and we'll see you at the next episode in the series.